There is a photograph taken sometime in 1922 in the gardens of a Dutch country house called Huis Doorn. In it, a man of 63 walks alone along a gravel path, leaning heavily on a cane, his face weathered and gray, his uniform replaced by the plain coat of a private gentleman. He is surrounded by the bare trees of a Dutch winter. The grounds are quiet. There are no generals at his side, no aides de camp, no crowds cheering his name, just an old man and a cane and the silence that comes after catastrophe. This is Friedrich Wilhelm Victor Albert of Prussia, Kaiser Wilhelm II, the last German emperor, the man who ruled the most powerful continental nation in Europe for 30 years, who sent 20 million people to their deaths. In a war his foreign policy made inevitable, who dismantled with his own hands the most sophisticated diplomatic system the 19th century had produced, and who spent the final 23 years of his life in exile in a foreign country, chopping wood. He would chop down an estimated 40,000 trees at Doorn before he died. Historians have searched for meaning in this compulsion, and they have not had to search far. A man with a withered arm driving an axe one-handed into tree after tree after tree. There is something in it about the need to prove something, the need to conquer, the need to demonstrate force where finesse had always failed. It is, in miniature, the story of his entire reign. Swing the axe, never mind the consequences, never mind what falls. Or to understand how Germany arrived at this man, and how this man arrived at that gravel path in Doorn, you must go back to the night of January 27th, 1859, and a birthing chamber in the Berlin Palace, where the future of an empire was delivered, quite literally, in catastrophe. The labor of Princess Victoria, daughter of Queen Victoria of England and wife of Crown Prince Friedrich of Prussia, became complicated with terrifying speed. The child was positioned feet first, and the physicians, frantic to save the mother's life, applied force that permanently severed the nerves along the infant's left side. The boy who entered the world that night, the boy who would one day command the armies and navies of Imperial Germany and issue the blank check that lit the fuse of the First World War, came into existence already marked. But his left arm would never develop properly. It would remain for the rest of his life visibly shorter and weaker than the right, a thing to be hidden in photographs, managed with practiced ingenuity, and never, ever spoken of directly. But the arm is only the beginning. What follows is worse in a subtler way. His mother, the Princess Victoria, educated, opinionated, shaped by the progressive values of her father, Prince Albert, and the constitutional convictions of the British court, is determined that her son will overcome his disability. She subjects the young prince to years of physical therapies. Doctors hold his head in braces. Galvanic current is applied to the damaged arm in hopes of stimulating the nerves. He is made to ride horses before he can manage it, strapped to the saddle until he learns the balance his arm cannot provide. Oh, it is done in love. It is experienced as shame. The boy grows up understanding that his body has betrayed the image he is required to project, and that his mother considers this betrayal a problem to be solved, not a condition to be accepted. The result, in the psychology of the adult he becomes, is not difficult to trace. He builds over years and with extraordinary energy a compensatory architecture of display. He collects military uniforms the way other men collect debts, eventually hundreds of them, one for every regiment, every occasion, every fantasy of martial supremacy. He rides at the head of parades with practiced stiffness, the damaged arm held just so, the posture immaculate. He speaks in pronouncements rather than sentences. He demands ceremony, theater, yet the constant management of his image as the supreme warlord of the most powerful monarchy in Europe. He performs without pause the role he has decided he must play, and beneath the performance, beneath the uniforms and the proclamations and the furious activity, there is the boy in the birthing chamber, insecure, desperate for approval, convinced that any admission of weakness will be punished. The historian Thomas Nipperdey would later describe him with devastating precision, gifted with a quick understanding, sometimes brilliant, but superficial, hasty, restless, unable to relax without any deeper level of seriousness, without any desire for hard work or drive to see things through to the end, uncontrollable and scarcely capable of learning from experience, desperate for applause and success, romantic, sentimental, and theatrical, but unsure and arrogant, with an immeasurably exaggerated self-confidence and desire to show off. And as Bismarck observed of him early in his life, he wanted every day to be his birthday. This is the man who will inherit an empire. His parents belong to a different tradition. Crown Prince Friedrich is a man of genuine liberal instinct, cultured, humane, married to a woman who shares his convictions entirely. Their plan for Germany, nurtured across years of waiting for the throne that Friedrich's long-lived father refuses to vacate, is simple and ambitious in equal measure. When they take power, they will steer the German Empire toward a more parliamentary form of government, something resembling the constitutional monarchy of Britain. Ministers will be accountable to elected bodies. The Reichstag will gain real authority. Germany will modernize not merely industrially, but politically, becoming something a liberal European in 1880 might recognize as a peer. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, considers this plan an existential threat. Bismarck has been the dominant force in German politics since 1862, when a desperate King Wilhelm I, cornered by a rebellious parliament, called him to Berlin as a last resort. What followed is one of history's great exhibitions of political genius. Bismarck unified Germany through 3 precisely calibrated wars: against Denmark in 1864, Austria in 1866, France in 1870, and proclaimed the German Empire in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, while France still burned. He then spent the next 2 decades constructing a European order in which Germany sat at the center of a web of alliances so complex and so carefully balanced that no combination of powers could easily threaten it. His reinsurance treaty with Russia is a work of breathtaking diplomatic audacity, a secret agreement guaranteeing Russian neutrality that directly contradicts what Russia believes Germany's other commitments mean. He holds all the threads simultaneously, trusting no one else to hold them. This system requires one thing above all else: a Kaiser who trusts Bismarck completely and does not interfere. Wilhelm I, the old emperor who has been on the throne since 1861, provides this. Their relationship functions like a long marriage of necessity. 2 men who often disagree, but who need each other too completely to part. Bismarck saves the monarchy from a parliamentary revolution in 1862. The Kaiser repays him with confidence and deference for 28 years. Crown Prince Friedrich would not provide this. He and his English wife have their own ideas, and Bismarck has no intention of governing at the pleasure of people with different ideas. So, in the 1880s, as the young Prince Wilhelm comes of age, Bismarck makes a calculation of characteristic cold precision. He separates the boy from his parents. He arranges for his own son Herbert to tutor the prince at the foreign ministry. He teaches him about Prussian prerogatives, about the divine right of monarchs, about the dangers of English liberalism. He shapes the young man deliberately as a counterweight to the liberal inheritance his parents represent. And it is the most consequential miscalculation of Bismarck's career. He manufactures a weapon and hands it to a man who has no intention of remaining anyone's instrument. The year 1888 arrives like a hammer striking 3 times in quick succession. In March, the old Kaiser Wilhelm I dies at 90, and Friedrich ascends the throne. But Friedrich is already dying. Throat cancer has consumed his voice and is consuming everything else. He communicates by written notes, passed to ministers with a hand that grows weaker by the week. His reign lasts 99 days. The liberals who have waited a generation for their moment watch it evaporate in the spring sunshine. In June 1888, Kaiser Friedrich III is gone, and the throne passes to his 29-year-old son. The year of the three Kaisers ends with Wilhelm II. He arrives on the scene with the energy of a man who has been waiting too long in an anteroom. Within days of ascending the throne, he is issuing orders, dismissing officials his parents had favored, making it clear to anyone who cares to observe that this reign will be conducted differently. Bismarck, watching this performance with the wariness of an old man who has seen young monarchs before, initially manages the relationship with practiced skill. He allows Wilhelm his theater. He keeps the important decisions in his own hands. He believes, as he has believed about every obstacle in his career, that the situation is manageable. He is wrong. The collision comes along several fault lines simultaneously, and each one reveals something essential about the nature of the man on the throne. The first is labor. In 1889, a wave of strikes sweeps through Germany's coal mines. The Social Democrats, whom Bismarck has spent a decade suppressing through his anti-socialist laws, emerge from the Reichstag elections of February 1890 as the single party with more votes than any other. Bismarck's instinct is aggressive: tighten the laws, provoke the socialists into violence, manufacture a crisis that justifies authoritarian revision of the Constitution and makes him, once again, indispensable. He wants to trap the left into a confrontation he can win. Wilhelm looks at this calculation and recoils. He is 29 years old, newly crowned, and he wants, in this early moment, to be loved. He imagines a different approach, a gesture of imperial generosity toward the workers, protections and reforms offered from above. A demonstration that the throne cares about the welfare of German labor. He issues a royal decree promising social reforms without consulting the Chancellor. He maneuvers around Bismarck and goes directly to the State Council. He is, in this moment, not wrong on the merits, but the act is a declaration of independence, and Bismarck understands it as such. The second fault line is foreign policy. Bismarck's reinsurance treaty with Russia, the secret agreement at the heart of his entire diplomatic system, is due for renewal. The advisors gathering around Wilhelm are younger men without depth or patience for complexity. They argue that the treaty is dishonest, that it cannot be reconciled with Germany's other commitments. Wilhelm listens to them. The treaty, he begins to believe, should be allowed to lapse. And the third and most immediate fault line is a piece of paper. A Prussian cabinet order from 1852 specifies that the minister-president of Prussia must be present whenever a minister meets with the King of Prussia. Bismarck, sensing that Wilhelm is meeting with ministers and building alliances without him, dusts off this old order and invokes it as a weapon. No minister shall have access to the emperor except through the Chancellor. He is, in plain language, attempting to cut the Kaiser off from his own government. It is too much. When Wilhelm discovers that Bismarck has revived this order and learns, additionally, that the Chancellor has arranged for a mocking comment from Tsar Alexander III about the young Kaiser to reach Wilhelm's ears, the confrontation becomes unavoidable. On the morning of March 15, 1890, a messenger arrives at the Chancellery. The Chancellor is summoned. The meeting that follows is, in every sense, historic. Bismarck is 75, his massive frame reduced by gout and exhaustion, his face red with fury. Wilhelm is formally controlled, cold in the manner of a man who has rehearsed the scene. The air between them carries the weight of everything that has been and everything that is about to change. Bismarck does not yield. He accuses the Kaiser of undermining him, of meeting with ministers behind his back, of not understanding how government actually works. He has managed 3 Kaisers. He is not accustomed to justifying himself. Wilhelm does not yield either. He will not be managed. He will not be surrounded by Bismarckian walls and call it freedom. 3 days later, on March 18, 1890, Bismarck's letter of resignation is in the Kaiser's hands. The Iron Chancellor, the architect of German unity, the master of European diplomacy, the man who had made Germany the central pivot of continental politics, is leaving office. The cartoon that appears in Punch magazine the following week will say everything. A great ship sails away from a small pilot descending a rope ladder into a dinghy. The caption, dropping the pilot. And now Wilhelm II is free, and now the damage begins. He calls his new direction the new course. He appoints Leo von Caprivi as Chancellor, a decent military man with no political gifts beyond obedience. The message is clear. There will be no more strong chancellors. There will be no more Bismarcks. There will only be ministers who execute the Kaiser's will. And the Kaiser's will is the policy of the German Empire. The first victim of the new course is the Reinsurance Treaty. In June 1890, 3 months after Bismarck's dismissal, Germany allows it to lapse. The advisors who counseled this decision, men who lacked the patience or the understanding to value what Bismarck had constructed, consider the matter resolved. Russia will simply understand that Germany remains friendly. Russia does not understand this. Russia, finding its bond with Germany severed without explanation or replacement, looks elsewhere. By 1894, it has negotiated a military alliance with France, the encirclement of Germany that Bismarck spent 20 years preventing. The nightmare scenario he considered the supreme strategic danger is being assembled by the very man who replaced him. Wilhelm, characteristically, he does not recognize this as encirclement. He recognizes it as ingratitude. Then comes the Weltpolitik, world policy. Wilhelm wants Germany to be a world power in the fullest sense, a colonial empire to rival Britain, a navy to command the seas, a presence in every corner of the globe. He wants Germany's place in the sun, and he intends to claim it with the directness that he considers a virtue and that diplomats across Europe are beginning to understand as something far more dangerous. In 1896 comes the Kruger telegram. Wilhelm sends a message of congratulation to the president of the South African Boer Republic for repelling a British-backed raid, openly siding against Britain in a colonial dispute. The British public, which has until this point maintained a generally favorable view of the German Kaiser, reacts with fury. Well, something shifts in the relationship between the two countries, and it does not shift back. In 1897 comes the naval expansion. Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz presents his plan for a German high seas fleet capable of challenging British naval supremacy, and Wilhelm embraces it with the enthusiasm of a man who has coveted his grandmother's navy since childhood. The Tirpitz plan is, from a strategic standpoint, a catastrophe masquerading as an ambition. Britain is a naval power. It has been a naval power for 3 centuries. Its empire depends on its navy. Its security is defined by it. The Tirpitz plan does not frighten Britain into accommodation. It does the precise opposite. That it transforms Britain from a cautious neutral, a country that has no particular reason to join the Franco-Russian alliance against Germany, into a country that has every reason to. The British begin their own accelerated building program. The Anglo-French Entente of 1904 follows. The Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907 follows that. The Triple Entente, the alliance that will fight Germany in 1914, is assembled, brick by brick, in direct response to Wilhelm's need to have a bigger navy than his cousins. In 1905 comes the Moroccan adventure. Morocco is not a German interest. Germany has no historical relationship with the region, no significant commercial presence, no genuine strategic stake. But France is extending its colonial authority there, and Wilhelm, jealous, restless, determined to demonstrate that Germany cannot be ignored, sails into Tangier Harbor on March 31st, 1905, rides a white horse through the streets of the port in a theatrical display of defiance, and publicly declares Morocco an independent state deserving of German support. The First Moroccan Crisis, as it will be remembered, accomplishes nothing Germany wanted and everything Germany feared. Britain and France, watching the Kaiser's impulsive intervention with alarm, forge a stronger partnership. The Anglo-French military staff talks that follow lead directly to the commitments that will bring British troops to France in August 1914. It is the pattern of the reign. Every action aimed at projecting strength accelerates the consolidation of the forces that will eventually destroy Germany. Every attempt to be taken seriously makes the other great powers more determined to contain the country that cannot be predicted or trusted. Then comes October 1908 and the Daily Telegraph affair, the moment when the Kaiser's talent for self-destruction reaches its full expression. Wilhelm grants an interview in 1907 to a sympathetic British colonel, Edward Stuart Wortley, believing the published version will improve Anglo-German relations. The interview is sent to Berlin for review. Through a sequence of bureaucratic failures, it reaches the Kaiser himself, who approves it for publication with minimal changes. On October 28, 1908, the Daily Telegraph publishes what can only be described as a masterpiece of inadvertent catastrophe. Wilhelm tells the British public that he is the only German who is truly their friend. Yet he claims that he personally designed the military strategy that Britain used to win the Boer War and sent it to his grandmother, Queen Victoria. He declares that the German people are hostile to England, meaning that his own people hate the British, while presenting himself as the lonely voice of Anglo-German friendship. He implies that France and Russia had urged him to join them in crushing Britain during the Boer conflict and that he had nobly refused. The British reaction is outrage. The French and Russian reaction is scornful amusement. Both governments publicly deny what Wilhelm has claimed. The German reaction is something deeper and more damaging: humiliation. The Reichstag debates the affair with a ferocity that threatens to permanently undermine the Kaiser's position. Chancellor von Bülow, who has allowed the interview to be published without proper review, and who now discovers that his career is at risk, distances himself from the Kaiser with the speed of a man saving his own skin. The aftermath is written on Wilhelm's face in every photograph taken after 1908. The features are more drawn, the eyes less certain. The bluster continues, but something beneath it has cracked. He suffers what contemporaries recognize as a kind of breakdown, not complete, not visible to the public, but present in the collapse of his characteristic confidence. In the years that follow, he will still make the speeches and attend the ceremonies and insist on his prerogatives. But the man who descends from his yacht onto the dock in Kiel or greets his generals in Potsdam is performing a role that he no longer quite believes in. And yet the machinery keeps moving, because this is the other dimension of the catastrophe, the way in which the structure of the German government under the Wilhelmine system has made catastrophe structural. Bismarck had designed a constitutional order in which the Chancellor was indispensable. Wilhelm had replaced that system with one in which the Kaiser was decisive, but without either the skill or the discipline to exercise decisive power wisely. The result, which historians of the Bielefeld school will call polycratic chaos, is a government in which different agencies and power centers pull in different directions, in which the military increasingly speaks over the civilian leadership, and in which the Kaiser's emotional states and personal impulsiveness shape policy in ways that no one can predict or moderate. His chancellors, Caprivi, Hohenlohe, Bülow, Bethmann-Hollweg, are not Bismarcks. They are managers of an increasingly unmanageable man, and the most able among them spend much of their energy not on governing Germany, but on preventing the Kaiser from governing it into disaster. They succeed partially most of the time. They do not succeed in the summer of 1914. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo on June 28, 1914, reaches Wilhelm on his yacht, where he is enjoying his summer cruise in Norwegian waters. He returns to Berlin in a state of agitation and begins writing his famous marginal comments on the diplomatic dispatches, emotional, impulsive, sometimes contradictory annotations in the margins of documents that will become historical evidence of a mind-making world historical decisions without the depth or patience to understand their weight. He scrawls about Serbia and honor and blood. He writes that now or never, Germany must back Austria. He issues the blank check of unconditional support to Vienna on July 5 to 6, 1914, telling the Austrian ambassador that Germany will stand behind Austria-Hungary, whatever it decides to do about Serbia. It is the decision that makes the First World War possible, not inevitable. Historians will argue that question for a century, but possible in a way it was not before. Because Austria, emboldened by the German guarantee, sends a deliberately unacceptable ultimatum to Serbia. Russia, bound by its own alliance commitments, begins to mobilize. Germany, by the logic of the Schlieffen Plan, must respond to Russian mobilization by attacking France first through Belgium. Britain, bound by treaty to protect Belgian neutrality and by 4 years of staff talks with France, enters the war. The chain reaction that Bismarck spent 20 years preventing is complete. Germany is fighting on 2 fronts. It is the nightmare made real. The war lasts 4 years, 3 months, and 14 days. Wilhelm plays an increasingly marginal role in its conduct. He is present at briefings, issues proclamations, appears in photographs with his generals, insists on his title of Supreme Warlord with the tenacity of a man who knows it has become largely ceremonial. By 1916, real power rests with Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff, who operate a de facto military dictatorship from their headquarters, while the Kaiser is managed with endless briefings designed to keep him occupied and out of the way. The end, when it comes with a speed and a completeness that no one in the German High Command has predicted. From August 1918 onward, the Allied offensive drives the German armies back continuously. The Hindenburg Line breaks. American troops pour into France with reinforcements that Germany cannot match. The home front is collapsing. Food is rationed to the edge of starvation. The population is exhausted and grieving. The Social Democrats and Communists are demanding peace. And in late October, the sailors of the Imperial Navy mutiny rather than sail on a final suicidal engagement with the British fleet. By November 9, 1918, Berlin is in revolution. The Republic has effectively been proclaimed twice in a single afternoon, once by a Social Democrat stepping onto a Reichstag balcony to prevent the Communists from getting there first, and once by the Communists anyway, from a different balcony. Prince Max of Baden, the last Imperial Chancellor, announces Wilhelm's abdication without the Kaiser's knowledge or consent. The Hohenzollern dynasty, which has ruled Prussia and its predecessors for 500 years, ends not with a battle or a treaty, but with a telephone call and a piece of paper. Wilhelm is at German military headquarters in Spa, Belgium, when the news arrives. He has been there since late October, trying and failing to find a way to remain on at least one of his 2 thrones, the German imperial crown and the Prussian royal crown, while surrendering the other. The constitution that Bismarck designed makes this impossible. The 2 crowns are legally inseparable. Even Hindenburg, a lifelong monarchist, has finally informed the Kaiser, with visible embarrassment, that the army will march home in good order, but will not fight for the imperial throne. In the early morning of November 10, 1918, Wilhelm boards the imperial train at a small railway station in Spa and travels to the Dutch border at Eisden. He waits there for 12 hours on the platform. The man who had wanted to be the greatest figure in Europe, standing on a Belgian railway platform in the rain, until the Dutch government confirms it will accept him. He crosses into the Netherlands as the German Republic is being proclaimed behind him. He will never return to Germany, not once, in 23 years of exile. But he settles first at Amerongen Castle, then purchases Huisdoorn, an elegant Dutch country house with 35 hectares of parkland, filling it with the contents of his Berlin palaces. 59 railway wagons carry the furniture, paintings, uniforms, and porcelain of the Hohenzollern court into the Dutch countryside. He maintains the rituals and the protocol of an imperial court in miniature. Plates are whisked away the moment His Majesty finishes eating. Staff address him as Kaiser. He reads from the Bible aloud to assembled household members every morning. The empire is dead, but its ghost dines promptly at 7, and he chops wood every day, or nearly every day, in the forests of the Dorn estate. The former Kaiser of Germany takes up his axe, one-handed, with the good arm, the damaged arm hanging always at his side, and drives it into tree after tree. He will fell 40,000 trees before he dies. He gives signed blocks of wood as souvenirs to visitors. He keeps records of significant milestones, the 5,000th tree, the 10,000th. He distributes firewood to the local Protestant church for distribution to the poor. His neighbors, not without irony, call him the woodchopper of Dorn. He writes his memoirs, naturally, claiming no responsibility for the war, defending his conduct across 30 years of reign, presenting himself as the misunderstood champion of German peace and British friendship. He pins his hopes, with the eagerness of a man who has learned nothing, on the Nazi movement and Adolf Hitler, in whom he sees the possibility of German restoration and the revival of the Hohenzollern cause. He writes to congratulate Hitler on the fall of France in 1940. Hitler does not need him, acknowledges the telegram with the minimum politeness required, and leaves the old man alone in his Dutch forest. Wilhelm II dies at Huisdoorn on June 4, 1941. He is 82 years old. He has outlived his empire by 23 years, his dynasty by the same, and the world that produced him by what feels like a geological age. The Netherlands is under German occupation when he dies. Hitler presented with the opportunity to return the Kaiser's body to Berlin for a state funeral, a ceremony that would have linked Nazi Germany to the Hohenzollern tradition, declines, honoring the Kaiser's own stated wish not to return to Germany until the monarchy was restored. A small military funeral is held at Dorn. The Kaiser's request that no Nazi insignia be displayed is ignored. He is buried in a purpose-built mausoleum in the grounds of Huisdoorn. He is there still. Occasionally, groups of Prussian nostalgists come from Germany to lay wreaths. The mausoleum is open to visitors on request. The house itself is now a museum, preserved more or less as he left it. The dining room table set for eternity. The special fork with 3 tines that allowed a man with a withered arm to eat without assistance. The rows of uniforms, the books, the smoking room, the study. A place where people lived and survived and maintained the appearance of a court long after the court had any meaning. What remains? When the wood chips settle and the last visitor has passed through the museum gates, is the question that every century asks about the men who break the things they inherit. Was it inevitable? Was there a version of this story in which Wilhelm II, given the same childhood and the same insecurities and the same compensatory needs, nevertheless found advisors wise enough to contain him or circumstances stable enough to survive his impulsiveness? Could the encirclement have been avoided without the naval race? Could the naval race have been avoided with different advice? Could July 1914 have ended differently if the man signing the blank check had been a man of patience and depth rather than sentiment and impulse? History does not permit certainty, but it permits evidence, and the evidence is this. For 28 years, a man of extraordinary ability managed the empire that Wilhelm inherited, managed it carefully, cynically, with a ruthlessness that made enemies and an intelligence that made the empire secure. That man's system had flaws. It was built around a single, indispensable genius, and would always have been vulnerable to succession, but it was keeping Europe from exploding. Then the man who dismissed him allowed the reinsurance treaty to lapse, drove Britain into the French alliance with a naval race born of personal envy, insulted every major power in Europe at intervals of roughly 3 years, gave Austria a blank check in a crisis he did not understand, and watched the war he launched devour everything he had wanted. Admiral Tirpitz, who built the navy that turned Britain into an enemy, been observed of his Kaiser in 1903, 11 years before the war, 10 years after the dismissal, that the sad and worrisome thing about this talented monarch was that for him, appearance always trumped substance. It is as good an epitaph as any. An empire built on substance, on the patient, difficult, grinding work of Bismarck's diplomacy, was handed to a man for whom appearance was everything. The trees fell, the empire fell with them, and in the silence of a Dutch forest, far from Berlin and the throne and the war and the dead, the man with the axe kept swinging at the wood because it was the only thing left that he could defeat.